So here we are, it is spring 2024, and the big question nobody wants the answer to is the FX 8350 still viable as of this year? And to be honest, it is very hit or miss. Can you still get a decent gameplay experience from this processor? Possibly, depending on the title. But let's start with this. Would technologies like frame generation possibly help compensate for performance issues? The answer to that would be probably not. Frame generation from both NVIDIA and AMD products works best when it is already having a stable 60 frames per second to pull from, as the response times will be better. When you're trying to use frame generation on a game that is only hitting 40 to 50 frames per second at the best of times, and often dropping to the low 20s, there really isn't much there to work with to keep the response times optimal. This means you're going to be dealing with a lot of lag, much more than normally considered acceptable in genres like FPS or racing sims. So forget about the different frame generation offerings. Does just tossing in a higher end graphics card keep the FX platform relevant? Maybe. I currently have an RTX 2070 Super installed in my FX system, and it depends on what kind of games you plan to play and how heavily they lean on the GPU as opposed to the CPU. But to be honest, I would not invest in anything other than a used RX 5700 XT, an RX 6600, a GTX 1660 Super, or possibly an RTX 2060 at this point. The problem is, a chunk of the titles these days simply don't seem to know how to fully utilize the FX, so you could risk throwing money away on a new graphics card and just find that you're not really satisfied with the results. Developers do not seem to be optimizing for the FX line with the same kind of efforts they're putting in from 2014 to 2019. You will notice subpar utilization happening with the FX processor line often in titles like Robocop Rouge City, Company Heroes 3, Plague Tale Requiem, and many other titles. And then you have to deal with new issues like AVX2 not being supported, which newer titles like Alan Wake 2 require to be able to run. And in addition to that, Windows 10 support is coming to an end in 2025, requiring you to move on to Windows 11, which you would only be capable of doing with a modified install. This processor is from 2012. It's gone the distance and proved it was more future-proof than the old i5 processors it had to compete with, let alone the i3 processors. But the journey for the FX line is about to come to its end. So where does this leave you if you're cash strapped and you want to upgrade on the processor side? Well, if you have a decent graphics card on hand at least, there is the AM4 platform. Ryzen 1st Gen supports AVX2 instruction set, so you would be able to play Alan Wake 2 without any issues. Now, if you do want to use Windows 11, you would have to use a customized installer to get it installed on Ryzen 1st Gen. But outside of that, Ryzen 1st Gen processors are pretty cheap, including the Ryzen 1700, which can be had for a really good deal at under $80 in the United States and Canada. 2nd Gen Ryzen is also pretty fairly priced also. It does not have the same issues with installing Windows 11 that 1st Gen does. You also have the older Core i7 6700 and 7700 to look at. Again, you would need to modify your Windows 11 installer to support the older processors, but they do support AVX2, so you'd be able to play Alan Wake 2. And the 6700 is pretty cheap these days, at least in North America. I've used the i7 6700 now in a couple of budget PC gaming builds for friends, and they've been pretty happy with these machines. They've been able to run any titles that they've wanted to play, and the games run fine, including games like Jedi Survivor, surprisingly enough, and Alan Wake 2, making them fairly ideal given the price. And the i7 6700 doesn't have the same CPU utilization issues in modern titles that the FX line has, making it just solid in general. At any rate, as a personal project, for as long as it is feasible for me to do so, I will keep posting videos concerning the performance of the FX in modern titles. If curious people who missed out on the FX come across these videos, great, maybe they'll find them useful to make their own opinions. People currently using FX processors, wanting to know how others' experiences are going, can possibly use these videos as a reference point. And with that, I end this with, let's see if the FX makes it to 2025. Until then. See you later.